Hello, everybody. This is Danny Beamer, Executive Director of VBR Star, and we're really excited to have Danny Karbassiyoon with us today. He is a former player of Roanoke Star, VBR Star. Started in our club when he was 9 or 10 years old, and had a really good youth career here with our club, and did obviously extremely well. Ended up signing a deal with Arsenal and moving to London and living there and playing for Arsenal. And then also got loaned to Ipswich Town. He also got loaned to Burnley. So played in a lot of different levels.
There we go. All right, cool.
So did we hit?
So this is what we'll do.
See you on there. So we're adding Danny on. He's connecting now. There he is. How's it going, Danny?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We really appreciate you taking some time to spend with us during these crazy times, and we really appreciate you being here to answer some questions. We've got some questions that are set, but we've also had some club members send in questions earlier, and as this is going on, we'll probably get some questions as well. So you been doing okay?
Yeah, not too bad. Trying to survive. I'm in London, as you said, and it's been a bit wild because this city is generally buzzing and always chock full of people and a lot of stuff, and it's pretty empty. If you've ever been to London, you can, I guess up until probably a week, 2 weeks ago now, you could walk down Oxford Street and Regent Street and Piccadilly Circus with like 0 people. So it's a bit of a strange time, but it's nice that it's hopefully picking back up again a little bit.
Yeah, I saw some pictures where it's just totally empty places that are usually just flocked with tourists and people. So it is kind of different. It is kind of weird. So, hey, just, why don't we start off, tell everybody, how did you, get involved in soccer, and how did that kind of all start off? And one of the questions as you're talking about it, is one of the one of the club people asked about like how much time you trained as a kid and things like that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your beginnings and all that?
Yeah. So, as you obviously know, Beam, I was born and raised in Roanoke. So, my parents, my mom's Italian, my dad's Iranian. So I suppose people would say I was born with a little bit of football blood, or soccer blood rather, in me, which was nice. I played quite a few sports when I was growing up. Actually, obviously I love soccer. I started playing soccer I think when I was about 5 years old, and in the rec league in North Roanoke, and then eventually went over to the Roanoke Star when I was about 8 years old, I think, when in the under nines initially, and then when I turned 9, I played in the under nines again, and then carried on obviously all the way through under 18 as well. But yeah, I played basketball, baseball. I wrestled in middle school and high school. I did judo for a little bit as well. I did a lot of things, and then really started focusing on soccer when I was probably about 14 years old, in terms of just kind of quitting everything else and only playing soccer. I mean, from a training perspective, I used to play quite a bit on my own and with friends as well, especially during the summers when there wasn't much going on the club side. Some of the old guys that we used to play with, like Drew Harrison and John Hartman, and Donnie Smith and Brad Collins, Adam Peters, all these guys that all came up through the club as well. We'd always go down to River's Edge and kick around for probably 2 or 3 hours, until we were completely exhausted and dead, and then go home and then come back again the next day and do it all over again. On top of that, I generally play on my own as well. Probably maybe 2 hour and a half, 2 hours every single day as well, regardless of if I had training with the club as well. We generally trained then. I think it's probably changed now where you guys can train a bit more, but we used to train twice a week as a team. And I would generally come home from school around 3 o'clock. I lived right behind Northside High School. I get home around 3:10, 3:15. Run upstairs, change real quick, grab a ball, put my shoes on, go into the backyard and do a bunch of technical stuff. I had a pretty nice, like the backyard was set up in a way that there was a nice brick wall where I could use it to ping a ball against and get it back and work on my first touch, obviously work on dribbling and through cones and juggling and all that good stuff. And if I had training that day, I'd tend to do that until about 5:15, 5:30, and then get in my car and drive to Bergland or River's Edge or wherever I needed to be, basically, and then train again, come back home, do my homework, and go to bed. So that was. Sorry, can you see me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're all right. You're all right.
Yeah, so
I
basically,
remember.
sorry, this is just let me just, okay, cool. I don't know, something just popped up. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that was basically my
His side though. No.
Can you still hear? Is this still okay, Beam?
Yeah, you're kind of fading in and out a little bit. Now you're
Okay.
good. I think.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so that was basically it during my time in high school. I was very, very focused, obviously, on at the time I really wanted to get a college scholarship. I knew I wanted to go pro kind of eventually, but I didn't really know how that would go about happening. Especially then, in the kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a huge presence of agents and scouts and all that good stuff in the United States. Like there wasn't really like a pipeline to get to go pro. It was mostly like go to college, play a year or two, and then go to MLS and then see kind of what happens from there. So, but a majority of my time as a kid was spent, with the ball, either in the garage if it was too cold to be outside, or in my backyard, blasting balls against our brick wall.
Yeah, or breaking windows or something like that.
I only
always-
ever broke one window, by the way, and I'm very proud of that. I hit the window multiple times. At the time I did break the window, it was an absolutely hammered shot into the window and it smashed. So my parents will say I only ever broke one window though.
Yeah, but I remember, calling you one time and it's like sleeting, freezing rain, and Anna saying, "Oh, he's outside working out." So I think it's important that kids hear that's if you can do whatever you want to do, but you've got to put the time in and just go into your club training and that's it. You're not going to be a top level player by doing that, because it is a commitment, it is a sacrifice. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think that was I'm as you know, obviously, I'm pretty competitive with everything that I do. So I knew, like, if I wanted to be, I always wanted to be obviously the best player in my team in the Roanoke Star, but I also wanted to be the best player if I, for example, made the state team the first time. I actually made the state pool. I got cut from the actual team my first 2 years, I think. But when I made the pool, I wanted to be the best player in the pool. When I wasn't, I figured, how can I continue working hard to be the best player in my team, then go on to the regional team. I didn't make the national team until actually after I went to Arsenal, and then the kind of getting called in Arsenal led to me getting a call to the national team as well. But really it was my mentality was always like, well, if we're only training twice a week, I'm not going to get better than my teammates unless I'm doing stuff outside of these 2 training sessions. I'll only ever kind of progress alongside them, essentially. And then when I kind of looked at a much bigger picture, I was thinking, if I do want to become a pro eventually in my career, I'm not just competing against kids from Roanoke or from Virginia or from Region 1 or from the United States. Like, I'm competing against kids that are, in Barcelona's youth system, kids that are at Arsenal, kids that are at Manchester United, kids that are in Sao Paulo and Rio. And those kids, aren't limited. There's a lot of different rules globally in terms of like how much they can play, how much they have to go to school. Like there isn't the rigid nature of that makes the United States an amazing place as well. But a lot of countries don't have those rigid rules that prevent people from just being outside with the ball all day long. So I already knew that I was going to be against them, if I wanted to compete in the world of soccer. So I kind of just had that mentality whenever I picked up the ball and went in my backyard.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So, the club helped you get a homestay in Germany and play soccer in Germany as a youth. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that? Your stay in Germany. I know. I mean, I know the details, but it's pretty interesting about how many different teams you played on at that
Mhm.
club and all that, and kind of how did that make you become a better player?
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. That came about, I think, when I was about I must have been 15, going on 16 at the time, or maybe I was 16 actually at that point when I moved over there. But um, basically, the whole idea was I'd had a knee surgery actually uh, the year before that had kind of set me back a little bit, and I planned on I'd wanted to go to Germany. I think one or two other boys had been in the years prior in the Roanoke Star as well, and you obviously had a bunch of connections over there. Ended up going, I believe, for 3 months to a small town just outside of Hamburg called Tram. Actually, it was a village where I ended up living. There was about, I think, 300 people in the village, and it was yeah, it was an amazing. I mean, from a there's two sides of leaving kind of home when you're 15 or 16 years old. There's the cultural side of getting to live in a different country and being exposed to different cultures, a different language, different lifestyle, obviously. And then there's also the soccer side. The first, yeah, it was, and also I was, as I said, I was 16 years old, which, you're a young, impressionable, it's a young, impressionable age where you're just thrown into a country that's, I would say, Europe in general is far more, seems far more liberal than the United States, especially for, for children. So, I was thrown into this household with, I think one kid was, one of the sons was 9, one was 15, and one was 18. So I kind of fell in between the 15 and 18-year-old and hung out with both of them primarily. Played in the under 16s and played in the the under 18s as well, and got to train with like the first team within the club as well. The first team was in like I believe like the 7th division in German football at the time. But it was interesting because the clubs in the United States don't always necessarily have the routes to the first team, or routes where if you're playing well, for example, you can just get bumped up to the under 18s, play for the 16s one weekend, and then you're called into the 18s the next weekend and get to train with the first team the following week, for example. So it was an interesting kind of opportunity to just get lobbed into this, like the deep end essentially, with this club where I didn't know anybody. My only friends were kind of the family that I was staying with, and I just met them, upon landing essentially. My mom flew over with me and basically just dropped me off and spent a week in Germany, but she was staying in a hotel and I was staying with the family, obviously. And then she went back to Roanoke, and I was just there for 3 months, learning how to kind of just sort stuff out on my own, and obviously with the family. So, yeah, it was interesting. Like you find yourself, from a soccer point of view, you find yourself in a dressing room, for example, where the coach is speaking German, all the players are speaking German, the halftime talk is in German. I brought my little German handbook for beginners basically, but I didn't really know I didn't really know how to communicate all that well in the first couple weeks. And then I started to learn how to say left shoulder, right shoulder, man on, all that good stuff essentially. And then I think the most important thing you realize as well, though, too, is it doesn't matter if you can necessarily speak the language out of the gate. They can tell if you're you let the game do the talking for you, essentially. And if they can tell that if they give you the ball that you're going to retain possession or create an opportunity or run past players, then I don't think they really care if you can't say hello, goodbye, or anything in German. They'll just keep giving you the ball, essentially. So it was it was a big learning experience. Obviously, as in the States, we're spoiled as well. There's some of the nicest facilities in the world at some of the youth training centers around the United States, where there's 25 fields, Bermuda grass, incredible places. The team that I was at actually trained on a cinder field. And if you guys have, obviously, for the players that have kind of been to Europe and played, they tend to do these cinder fields, which are essentially like a clay rock mixture, just because the maintenance is essentially nothing. Like, you just make sure that there's no weeds essentially, and it's just rocks. So that was a very a big eye opener for me. I'd gone from playing on grass my entire life to suddenly training. I think we trained 3 or 4 times a week on this on this cinder pitch, and then we would play our games on grass as well. But people would be slide tackling, and there was no holds barred essentially on that. You'd get tackled and slide across the cinder, and it was just kind of normal essentially. So it was definitely like a very big growing up period for me, and I matured quite a bit because it was the first time really I'd gone away from my parents for a really extended period of time.
Yeah, and that I was going to say that I remember it was tough at the beginning, very tough for you and your age and being away from home. But that experience, on top of the playing experience, on top of that culture, just helped you become a better player and the player that you've become. And it wasn't easy, but like I said, if it's easy, everybody'd be doing it. So that was a tough sacrifice, but a very beneficial one, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think and sorry to interrupt, I was just going to say, I think I came back from that, and I generally used to always be quite afraid of, going into the state pool training and the regional tryouts and all that stuff. And then when I came back, I had this pretty remarkable mentality and confidence in me that I was just like, I've been playing with guys that are twice my size and twice my age in some cases for the past 3 months. And I went back into a state camp and just had kind of like shed the shackles that had always made me nervous whenever I was going into any sort of ODP camp or state team stuff. And again, it just like, pushing myself and throwing me into the deep end made me stronger not only as a person, but also on the soccer field in terms of just being really confident in myself.
Yeah, definitely. So Danny went on to play for Arsenal. He's the only American to score for Arsenal so far. So Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got hooked up with Arsenal and how your Arsenal experience went?
Yeah, so I guess when I was 17 years old, I was like most youth soccer players. If you're competitive and you want to play soccer in college, like I was excited to see where the last 10 years of hard work were going to take me in terms of an education. And I, as I said, I was excited about going to college like most American kids are and playing and then seeing what kind of came next. So there used to be a camp called Adidas ESP Camp, which is no longer I guess around, unfortunately, but they'd invite essentially the top 150 high school players in the country to this one place for a 1 week camp where you basically just got to compete for a week in front of every single top college coach and essentially fight for scholarship. Sorry. I was actually waiting for this letter to come in from Adidas. A couple of the guys from the Roanoke Star had been invited. John Hartman and Drew Harrison had been prior. And I got a letter from Adidas. I was buzzing. I opened it and it actually said that I'd been waitlisted essentially. So it was quite a disappointing letter to receive from Adidas. About, I think 2 days before camp, I got a phone call. I was in my backyard, kind of just banging the ball against the wall, and I got a phone call. And I always used to bring, I don't want to say this was pre-cell phones, but it was certainly pre bringing your cell phone absolutely everywhere you went. So I'd always bring the house phone out just in case my parents needed me. And the phone rang, I answered it, and it was someone from Adidas saying that somebody had dropped out and that I was kind of next in line essentially to go to ESP. So they asked if I could be down in Wilmington, North Carolina in the next 2 days, which was really, it's far, but it's convenient enough for a Virginian, obviously. So I called my dad and asked him if he could do it. He said for sure. So we went down there. The way the camp was set up is basically you get assigned to into a team and then be given a couple coaches essentially throughout the entire week. And my coaches just happened to be Paul Mariner and Bob McNabb, who are former Arsenal players. I had no idea. Who they were at the time, or the fact that they were still in they still had connections with Arsenal, all that good stuff. I ended up having an amazing week. As I said, everything that I'd been working towards kind of all came together, and it wasn't just like, I don't know how to say this. I guess, yeah, everything that I had been working towards and been working for essentially came together. I ended up winning Golden Boot that week, which was, again, going from being on the wait list to winning, quote, I suppose, the best player at the camp was a pretty pretty amazing feeling, largely because there was a lot of the guys there were guys that were in the youth national teams. They were in residency. They were all the regional standouts. They were all guys that I'd basically been reading about, wanting to be with them in national teams and at competitions and at youth World Cups throughout most of my teens. And they were there, and nobody really knew who I was. So I didn't really have any pressure in terms of performing at the camp, apart from the pressure that I was putting on myself. So after that camp, I got inundated essentially with college scholarships, which was pretty amazing because I didn't really mention it, but from the competitive side of me, like while I used to play soccer all the time and really focus on soccer, I also was hyper competitive in the classroom as well. I graduated valedictorian in my class in high school, and like the same amount of kind of like focus that I brought into the pitch, I brought into the classroom, just in terms of wanting to be the best in class as well. I was probably that just really annoying kid that was always either playing soccer, doing my homework, and getting stuff done. So I ended up getting as I said, a lot of scholarship offers, like full rides to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, UVA, Duke, UNC, like all the amazing schools that have incredible soccer programs, but also amazing academic programs, And then I also ended up getting a phone call from Arsenal's chief scout about a week after the camp ended. And he called and said, Danny, I don't know if you've, he said, my name's Steve Rowley. I'm the chief scout of Arsenal. I don't know if you've ever heard of us, but we're a pretty big club in England. And I was like, yes, I've definitely heard you guys. So they ended up inviting me on a 2-week trial, basically that summer. So I was 17 at the time. So I went to England for 2 weeks, and had I signed, I would have been basically too old to play for the youth team, because the youth team would have been under 18. I would have turned 18 the following year, and I would have been too old. So they basically just threw me in straight with the reserves, which was a group of 17 to 20-year-old players who, some of them had made their first team debut already. Some of them had been on loan already. Some had played in the Champions League, for example. And I was thrown in with them and when people ask, what is a trial like? You're basically just kind of thrown into the environment, and they just see essentially how you do. There's obviously tests, like physical tests, and they'll do some, especially now they'll do a bunch of mental tests and all that good stuff, personality tests to see how you'll deal with moving and living abroad and all that stuff. But really, you're just ingrained in their day-to-day schedule for 2 weeks. So that ended up going really, really well. Again, I used to have this huge fear whenever I was thrown into these teams where I didn't really know anybody, where I'd go into this little shell and not perform the way that I was capable of performing. And I think going to ESP and just not caring anymore and realizing it was an amazing opportunity to get, that could potentially change my life and change the way the schools that I went to and what I'd have to pay, if I had gone to school. I realized that I needed to just release those shackles and just actually be myself and play the way that I knew I could play. So the first couple of days were difficult. It was the fastest, best, most competitive, soccer I'd ever been a part of. And ESP was definitely the highest level I'd ever played in prior to that, because I'd been in the Roanoke Star, I'd been in the state team, I'd been in the regional team. And then ESP was this conglomerate of all the best players in the country. And then when I went to Arsenal, it was just another 10x better than that, because now there's players from all over the world that are the top players, the captains of their national teams, captains of the under 18 national teams, 20 national teams, all in one place, just making it ultra competitive. So as I said, I spent the 2 weeks training with the reserves mostly, and then my last training session was actually I ran out with the reserves ready to train, and the coach of the reserves, his name's Eddie Nidvicki, he said, Danny, you're with the first team today. And there was zero preparation, zero idea that I was going to be training with the first team that day. And he said, you can go around. Obviously I knew where the first team pitches were. He said, just go around the corner and just join in. So that goes I go from training with the reserves, which was, incredible, to I round the corner and it's media day at Arsenal in preseason. So there's about 500 photographers on the sidelines. All of them kind of the cameras turn as a new player's running out, because, everybody's super interested to see who clubs are signing and all that good stuff. and it's just me from Roanoke, Virginia, running over. I just ran over to Arsene Wenger was obviously the manager. I ran over to Arsene Wenger and said, where do you need me? Hello, I'm Danny, all that good stuff. And he said, oh yeah, just join in. And the team was, warming up already. So, the team at that point, it was 2002. There was Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, Robert Pires, Ashley Cole, Sol Campbell, Freddie Ljungberg. Like there were some of the biggest names in world football at the time, and one of the best teams, ever to play. So I got thrown in with them, and got to just play a normal session essentially with them. I got to play up front. I was the striker at the time, and when Arsene would used to call out the teams of who would play with who, he'd say, like Thierry, Patrick, whoever else, yellow bibs, and he said Thierry and Danny are up front for this team. So I got to play with Thierry Henry as a striker in one of my trial sessions, which is really fun. But it was an amazing time. They ended up offering me a contract. As I said, like it was a really difficult situation for me because this all happened within about 3 weeks, essentially, in terms of like coming off of the waiting list for ESP Camp to suddenly having scholarship offers, as I said, to like every school I'd ever dreamed of going to, and now as well as like a contract offer from Arsenal. They knew that I was quite focused on school and serious about school as well. So Steve Rowley, who was the chief scout at the time, said, you can finish your last year of high school, so at least you finish that portion of your life, and then we'd love to sign you on a contract after high school, so you'd move over like immediately. And they basically said, if you can come over a couple times during the year to make sure that you're still keeping fit and all that good stuff, then it'd be great. So I think in December I went back, and they were playing Valencia in the Champions League at Highbury, which was just amazing. Highbury was like such an amazing ground. It was a ground that, like, as a kid growing up in the States, like I dreamed of like just seeing it, never mind actually playing there. And so when I got to go watch them in the Champions League, I remember they used to give me like a phone so I could use to call my parents when I was on trial or training. And I called my dad, and I was like, I think I made my decision while like the Champions League songs playing in the background. And so I made the decision, and then I ended up moving to England when I was, I guess, 18. I'd graduated high school. All my friends went to college, and I came over here and went for it.
Yeah, and that's been great success. And I remember you calling me up, or maybe I don't know, but saying, hey, I think I might get to play tonight. And Arsenal was playing Man City in the Carling Cup, and the first team. And back then, we couldn't get it here, so I had to pay for it on the internet just to listen to it. And so I'm listening to it. The game's going on. It's about 3/4 over, and Danny not in yet. But all of a sudden, they said, we have a substitute, Danny Karbassiyoon from Roanoke, Virginia. Or no, Roanoke Star, they even said. And then, Danny ends up scoring a goal. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And one of the questions from one of the players says, how did you remain calm, playing in front of a huge crowd like that? How did you keep your calmness and all that? So why don't you tell just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the game that Danny's referencing here, it came in my second year that I was at Arsenal. And again, my first year was really tough, just like going over there and suddenly going from training, every day of the week by myself and a couple days a week with my team to basically every single day of the week, like 5 days a week, day off, and then play a game as well. And it definitely became a job. And if you're not used to it, and you're not prepared for it, then it does just kind of wear you down and shock you a little bit. And the club knew that. They said, generally when players come over here, it takes them a year to settle and kind of like find their feet and get comfortable. Obviously, new culture. It's dark. It's dark often here. It rains a lot. It's cold. It's not the sunniest of, it is an island, but it's not the sunniest of islands in the world. So after that first year, I came back really, really refreshed. I actually ended up switching from a striker to left back and like left midfield as well. But the important thing was that I was actually getting to play, which was awesome. And just getting into the reserves was really, really tough. I mean, that in my second year, especially, like they used to use the reserves as like, if you're not playing in the first team every week, then you'll likely be getting minutes in the reserves. So like on any given game, we'd have Robin Van Persie, Jeremy Vieira, like Sol Campbell played a couple times in the reserves. Philip Senderos and Johan Giroux, who I've seen have joined in here as well. Like they were involved in a lot of those games as well. So like, again, making the jump from the reserves to the first team was a huge deal. And like, I spent my second year training with the first team actually a lot because Gal Clichy and Ashley Cole kept getting injured, like one after the other. And the first team generally tends to train with about 22 players, so they can play a full-sided game if they need to. So I was just getting called in to train with the first team regularly, and then the Carling Cup came around, and basically all the reserves were brought in. The way Arsene used to train was like he'd show you the team that was actually going to play generally the day before, so you would see if you were starting, you would know who was starting. But the subs, he wouldn't announce the subs or who was traveling sometimes until the day of. So we were all told to dress in our tracksuits on the day of the game to come into the training ground, and they would post a list. And if you were on the list, you would get on a bus and go to the airport and fly to Manchester. And if you weren't on the list, then you just take your tracksuit off and put your training clothes on and go about your day again like it was a normal day. So because my last name's quite long, it was pretty easy to see that my name was on the list, which is an amazing, a really amazing feeling. We flew up to Manchester. Again, like just walking, like all these were like a bunch of first things that happened, right? Like walking into a dressing room and seeing a jersey hanging, in a locker with your name on the back that you haven't bought on soccer.com is like a really cool, a really cool feeling that you actually like earned it, and it was like, first I'm traveling, then I'm on the bench, then I see my name, on the back of a shirt, like then we go out and warm up. It's like, as I said, these are all like first things that were just happening that night, which was really cool. And the game was on I think a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, so it was on Sky Sports, so there was the whole Sky Sports deal, everywhere, and the tunnel and all that good stuff. And then we had a really young team, and a lot of the players that played that night were actually making their debut as well. So like Philippe Senderos, who played in several World Cups with Switzerland, was making his debut that night. Johan Giroux, similar, played for Switzerland, several World Cups, is making his debut. Robin Van Persie scored his first goal that night. Manuel Munoz was playing. Cesc Fabregas was playing. There was a lot of really good young players that were kind of up and coming. And there was also like a lot of really cool storylines happening because Arsenal had just lost in the league. Their unbeaten run had come to an end. So the first team had gone 49 games unbeaten, and that had come to an end the previous week. And then we had to actually go back and they lost at Manchester United. And then we went back to Manchester City. So it was like this whole ordeal, like, can Arsenal kind of like bounce back? I wonder what the new wave looks like. We ended up scoring first. As I said, Robin Van Persie scored our first goal, and then in the 82nd minute, I got to come on as a sub. And to answer whoever asked that question, it's really nerve-wracking because nothing prepares you from going from playing, for example, in the Roanoke Star setting to suddenly you're playing in the reserves, where there's like maybe anywhere between 1,000 and like 5,000 people depending on the game, to now there's like 25,000 people and you're in a proper stadium with TV cameras and everything that you see happening in the production on a Saturday morning is happening in front of you. So like when you're coming on as a sub, there's the board goes up and all that good stuff. So yeah, it was the 82nd minute. I had like 8 minutes to go out and try to make an impact. Sebastian Larsson at the time wasn't a left back, but he was getting to play left back because he was doing really well in the reserves. But he was getting absolutely run ragged by Sean Wright Phillips. Bless him. Sean Wright Phillips is one of the fastest, most like trickiest guys at the time, and he was just like running at Seb all the time. So I was sent on as like kind of support for Seb as well, just to like see out the game, essentially. But being the striker that I always was and that I always am, any opportunity to go forward, I'd certainly take it. And in like the 93rd minute, the game was quite open at the time. We ended up breaking. Johan Giroux, of all players, I think he was playing like right midfield at the time as well. He broke down the side, got it, or played a ball up. Quincy Owusu-Bay got it, played it back to Johan. Johan kind of brought it around. Cesc Fabregas got the ball, And then Sess ended up playing an amazing just weighted ball in behind Danny Mills, who I ran behind, grabbed it, and then shot and scored. So yeah, again, when I talk about like all the firsts happening, like it was kind of like, get my jersey, actually get to play, and then actually get to score. And then they ended up scoring right after I scored, so it ended up turning out to be the winner, which is a really cool, kind of a really cool storyline as well. So, funny enough, because I only played about 10 minutes, we flew back to London, and then I had to train the next day because I didn't play enough to actually like warrant getting any time, getting time off essentially. So, yeah, going into the training ground, obviously the next day was a great feeling because all the first team players had like watched the game. Like Patrick Vieira walked up to me. And Philip has just said Danny makes it sound so easy, and I can guarantee you that it wasn't. But I remember Patrick Vieira walked up to me, and Johan Giroux and I were walking onto the pitch because we were like, I think we were the two like guys that had to actually train again because we came on as really late. Late subs, and as we're walking up, Patrick Vieira walked over to us and was like, "Oh man, you guys, you think it's so easy, huh? You come on 10 minutes, you score the winner, and you're in the newspapers, and you guys are the hero, huh?" So it was cool because there was a little bit of banter, obviously, there as well. But like they were really nice. But yeah, like just because you do that, by no means that you've made it, And the staff at Arsenal are sure to remind you that if at 18 years old, if suddenly you're playing in front of 20,000 people and you're you're getting all this publicity, and like it can go to your head really easily, and like the staff ensure that like that they make that you have to stay grounded and you got to keep focusing and working. And one game playing for Arsenal is wonderful, but if you want to make it, you have to play at least 100 games. So yeah, so it was I ended up getting to play. The next game in the Carling Cup was actually at Highbury, so I ended up getting to play at Highbury as well, which as I mentioned earlier, was like just this amazing stadium. Getting to be in the tunnel there, if you ever got to see it or if you ever got to play there, like it's just like the tightest thing ever. Where while you're waiting to come out of the stadium, you're literally shoulder to shoulder rubbing against the players that you're going to be playing against. So that was awesome. We ended up beating Everton 3-1 there, and I got to play the whole game, which was great. And then the last game that I got to play was at Manchester United at Old Trafford, and unfortunately we lost. We ended up losing 1-0, but it was, again, I got to come on for like the last 30 minutes, I think, in that game, and there was about 75,000 people there, which was just a phenomenal. Playing for, like, representing Arsenal against Manchester United, especially at that time where like that rivalry was just absolutely enormous. Getting the chance to do that in front of 75,000 people, where everybody in the world is watching this game, was a really special feeling. Sadly, we lost, but it was a nice memory.
And that's, one thing that I do, Danny, talking about, there's always somebody better than you. You can't think you're ever the best. And Danny is a very humble player, and I've coached him since he was 10 off and on, and that's a great quality to have. And I remember going over, and I got the fortunate chance to watch the reserves train and Danny train. Then I got to go into the dining hall just with the first team and the reserve team. And Danny at the time was on the reserve team, but the whole first team, when they came in, they didn't say hello to anybody else on the reserve team except Danny. Say, Danny Karbassiyoon, and wave. And so, that's how much he was respected there. And a lot of it to do with his character and the kind of person you were, Danny, which, helps you become the player that you are now. So another question we'll move on to just real quick. I don't want to take up your whole day, but what advice would you give a player in our club who wants to try to play, at the next level? I know you've touched on a lot of those things, but what kind of advice would you give a player that really wants to try to play, whether it's collegiately or professionally or whatever? What kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing. So after I finished playing, unfortunately, when I hurt my knee when I was 22 and had to retire from actually playing. I ended up becoming a scout for Arsenal and spent quite a few years traveling around CONCACAF and now a little bit here in England as well, like looking for players. And it's pretty amazing. Like when you become a scout, you start to see qualities and stuff of what you'd actually want to bring in players that you'd want to scout. And you start to look at the entire package and say it's really easy to watch a game on television and say, hey, we need to sign Messi, or we need to sign Suarez, or we need to sign this player because they're scoring a lot of goals and that's it. But when you're actually looking at a player and assessing him and trying to figure out if you should either bring him in on trial or actually spend a bunch of money on kind of initiating a transfer fee and all that good stuff, there's kind of a couple of characteristics that you're looking at, and I think any scout or anybody that works in soccer can tell you this. But there's the technical side, the tactical side, the physical side, and then their character and their kind of personality as well. The technical side, I think, is probably one of the most important pieces that, in my opinion, Americans in general just lack, unfortunately. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because right out of the gate, this obviously isn't a criticism on youth soccer by any means, but I don't know if out of the gate it's more structured and it's okay, we have to play in this formation and we're doing this and we're trying to win tournaments and all that good stuff. But I feel like a lot of the technical ability that players develop, especially overseas and all over the world, they do it when they're playing with their friends in the park or on the beach or, in a backyard or on a basketball court. And I don't think, unfortunately, that happens enough in the United States. And that's where, the Dutch, for example, some of the Dutch are the most technically gifted kids in the world because there's an actual culture around playing in the streets. And if you guys, being you obviously know, when you go to Holland, you can see just that happening in the streets almost everywhere, and that is that helps you greatly when it comes to actually transitioning over to the professional game or as far as you want to go. I'd like to think I used to spend a lot of time working on my technical ability. I would dribble around cones, time myself, use my left foot, use my right foot. I did a lot of it, and I tracked myself. As I said, I used to time myself. I count all the juggles. If I can get to 1,000 juggles just in my right foot, I might not have to juggle the ball. In fact, I'll never have to juggle the ball 1,000 times in a game. But if a ball comes to me in one instance where I am super comfortable just taking it down and then shooting, then I'll know that I'll be confident doing that. If you're unable to do that, then you'll struggle, and B, you'll never be able to make an impact because nobody will ever actually give you the ball. When I came to Arsenal, despite thinking that I was quite technically astute, when I arrived, I realized that I was actually quite far down the pecking order when it came to technical ability, just because these kids had just been in this environment for a really, really long time. So if there is one thing that you can, and you just need yourself and a ball, and a little bit of space, and you can work on your technical ability. You don't need much space, at all. And I would, if it was basically the only way I would not be training outside was if the ground had frozen and it was kind of impossible to be running around and you'd be slipping and hurting yourself. And in which case I'd ask my parents to take the cars out of the garage and just use the garage as a little bit of a space, or go in the basement and use the unfinished basement at the time as a space to work on, dribbling and passing against the surface, and all that good stuff. So I think, that's, the tactical stuff. The tactical stuff will come when you're playing in an environment where there's a team and all that good stuff, and you start to learn spaces and all that. Also, I think watching the game, and actually trying to understand the position that you're playing and trying to watch the best players in the world and understanding why they're making the decisions that they're making, when they make them, how they make them, if you look at some of the best players in the world, they're not doing step overs 100 times and then doing a rainbow and a bicycle kick, right? They're fancy things. And I'll go watch players. I get tipped off by agents and people in my network saying, "Oh, Dan, you have to come watch this player play." And I go watch him, and he get the ball, and he would just do 3 step overs and then play a ball that he could have played prior to doing the 3 step overs. To me, it's great. He can do 3 step overs. I'm glad he's confident in doing that. But it doesn't show that he's a particularly intelligent player, because he didn't really need to do that, and he would have wasted time potentially. So just kind of understanding, if you watch the top guys, Lionel Messi very rarely ever does a step over. I don't know, I'm not 100% sure the last time I saw him do a step over. What he does do really well is he moves his shoulders really well and adjusts his body weight, and he's kind of a god in a bunch of other senses, clearly. But he's very, very efficient whenever he is on the ball. But watching and understanding like the players in your position, I think, is really important. I watched a lot of soccer growing up. Recorded, like, I have the entire 1998 World Cup, every single group stage game, like, perfectly labeled and everything, still on VHS. If anybody has a video player, then you're welcome to those now. But I had all of those. I watched them over and over again. I watched all the highlights of all the games, all the goals. But I probably could have done it more intelligently in terms of like watching movement of like why players are doing this. And that was another thing when I showed up at Arsenal, just like, I didn't get the ball for the first, as a striker, like I didn't get the ball in training sessions because defenders were just reading me like a book. Like I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough to warrant like getting space to like actually make it a point to actually give me the ball. And I didn't understand why. I was just kind of like running around in circles and nobody would give it to me. And then one of the coaches stopped me and said, Danny, like, you know, try to like, you know, step away and then come to feet, for example. If you want it in behind, like step to him and then go the other way and try to drag the defender around a little bit. And not to say that I was never taught this, because it's just stuff you learn, you know, it's stuff you learn playing youth soccer in the States. But I was always like relying on other parts of my game to run past players, whether it be strength or being fast or being technical enough to where I could get past them. But none of that really worked when I got to Arsenal. So I had to really change my mentality and understand, like, okay, it can be like a game of chess at times, you know, and like when you watch the top players in the world or the best games in the world where like there's two of the best teams playing against each other, like it's one mistake where one player switches off for 1 second and the other guy outsmarts him and gets the ball to his feet and then shoots and scores, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the biggest the biggest things. I saw a kind of to elaborate further on this, like I saw a video a couple days ago. Cesc Fabregas was talking to Rio Ferdinand about their kind of careers in this video, and it was fascinating because like Rio was explaining to Cesc, you know, how nervous he was whenever Cesc would get the ball and what he would have to do to like put the attacking players off, just to get a little bit of an advantage to prevent Cesc from playing through balls and all this good stuff. And like it's like those really, really fine like minutiae of like, how can you get any sort of advantage, whether it's like creating 1 yard of space for yourself, because just running around the pitch, as I said, asking for the ball won't get you the ball at that level. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. I know it's a little bit long-winded there, but the technical side of games is really, really important. You can work on that on your own, you know, in your backyard every single day. When you're watching games, just watch the players that you want to be like and try to emulate them whenever you get the chance.
Yeah, I remember you telling me the little details, just little tiny things that made such a big difference. And I think that's a big thing that you learn as a player that you don't always get, you know, at the younger age groups and your development. So I remember you saying that the fine details made a difference, that trying to do those and work on those things. So, hey, and then just one other last thing, you know, we'll wrap it up. You know, your book, Danny wrote a book. How long has it been now since that book's been out?
Probably 5 years. No,
5 years.
Yeah.
The Yankee Arsenal
Yankee.
Arsenal Yankee. And you can get it at SoccerStop, not soccer.com, that he said earlier, where you get replica jerseys. You can get replica jerseys at SoccerStop. And Danny's book at SoccerStop. Anna comes by us and drops them off for us. So,
Perfect.
But it's a great book. It really is. It tells about Danny's, it talks a lot about Roanoke and growing up in Roanoke, and then on to his career with Arsenal and things like that. So if you want to read a good book, it's a very good book that was written by Danny. So, Danny, I really appreciate your time, and you know, I know the club does, and we appreciate your support and all that, and hope you good success, you know, moving forward, and definitely want to see you soon. Hopefully you'll be in Roanoke here soon when all this stuff gets over with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, Danny.
All
Have
right,
a
see
good
you
one.
guys. Thank
See
y'all.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Easy. Screwy. And